period. So we wanted to hold the webinar today for both groups in order to get feedback from you, learn from you how it's going, and ways that we can support you, and also offer some areas of support that we can offer to you. Okay, our agenda today, so we're going to start with welcome and introductions, which I am doing. I am Cecilia Rowe, Director of Instructional Assessment, Professional Learning, and English Language Arts. And then we're going to move into the key themes for virtual mentoring and coaching, as well as questions or comments for the good of the group. And then we're going to adjourn somewhere around 2:25 with updates and other information, and give you a chance throughout the entire agenda for questions and answers. Okay, with us today I am Cecilia Rowe. We also have with us Heather Sowers, who is the Coordinator of Professional Learning in Title II. We also have with us Gail Green, who is the Coordinator of English Language Arts. Dan Capozzi, a specialist in the Office of Professional Learning and Instructional Assessment, who also happens to be the point specialist, the lead specialist for Induction. We also have with us Jennifer Wojak, another specialist in the Office of Professional Learning and Instructional Assessment, and Vanessa Williams, who is the specialist in English Language Arts, who oversees the Striving Readers Grant at the current time. She's actually working two roles. She has a foot in two offices, where she's also working in the Division of Early Childhood as well. So she's only going to be with us for a short time, and we're grateful that we still have her. So those are our key presenters today. But with us also, we have other various English Language Arts staff who will be available to answer questions in the chat room and chime in if needed. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to turn this over to Dan Capozzi.
Thank you, Cecilia. We wanted to basically bring you together today because we thought it'd be helpful for the group to have an opportunity to share some ways that the mentors and the coaches in your district are interacting with teachers as they are implementing this distance learning process. The tips included in here should be considered in addition to the good mentoring and coaching practices that are already going on in your districts. And as you're probably made aware, virtual mentoring and coaching presents its own set of unique circumstances. Our outcomes for today are to review some strategies for effectively supporting your teachers virtually, discuss how school closure has impacted your support for teachers, and to share successes, tips, and resources for mentors and coaches. I do want to let everyone know that this recording will be, we will be recording this, and so that if you have a question that we don't get to, we'll try to get to it eventually, either by emailing you or contacting you directly. If you do have a question, as Cecilia said, throughout the course of the presentation, you can type your question into the chat box. But as she mentioned also, we will have the opportunity through the course of the presentation to respond to certain prompts as we move forward. We've divided this presentation into 4 themes. Each theme we'll share a few tips. We'll allow you time to respond to a prompt, either in writing, in chat box, or on a Padlet. Your responses, we hope, will reflect what's happening in your district, and we're hoping that it will provide some insight for other districts. Our 4 themes for today are creating conditions for care, creating conditions for connections, understanding the context, and creating conditions for new learning. So, why do we need to be creating conditions for care? Many of the teachers that are out there now are overwhelmed, they're lonely, there's a great deal of anxiety out there right now. Being empathic shows that you care about the person. At the same time, the mentor coach should be aware of his or her own emotions. It's possible that the mentor coach is feeling anxious, uncertain, and afraid as well. So, a couple of tips. When you're demonstrating empathy, you want to ask how you're doing. Ask how the family's doing. What challenges are you facing today? You want to affirm the teacher and let them know that they're not alone, and that you understand where they're coming from, and try to put them at ease in these complex situations. Jen, I believe you're going to take this slide. Well, not here.
Can
Jen?
everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. So our second tip is for you to reach out regularly. So just touching base on a regular basis and asking how the clients are doing demonstrates that you care about them. And we want you to pay special attention to the people that you haven't heard from, those who are not asking for help, and make sure that you are reaching out to them. Everyone is responding to this situation differently, and coaches need to be aware of the different ways that people can respond. Keep in mind that many teachers have atypical schedules, but it's still important to touch base with them. So sending emails, asking them how they're doing, or how you might help from a distance, or even sending messages of support could be helpful.
Thanks, Jen. Tip number 3, don't jump straight into coaching. In traditional mentoring and coaching meetings, we normally would engage the person in small talk before beginning. We want to do that in this new environment as well. You could ask about how their health is, how their families are doing, talk about the weather, anything that gets you into a conversation with the client. Our 4th tip is generous listening. Be respectful and generous as you listen remotely, just as you would if you had the person sitting in front of you. Remember to turn off all means of distractions, phones, music, other means of distractions. Refrain from sending emails when you're online with the person. And one of the things that we probably all recognize, if you're typing on a keyboard, it shows that that can be heard at the other end of the line.
Okay, so we're going to take a minute and talk about how we are responding to our teachers at this moment. So take a minute and think about which teachers in your district are requiring the most care at this time. So please respond either by clicking in the chat box, or if you'd like to respond orally, go ahead and unmute yourself and share your responses with us.
I want to mention that if you've never used this platform before, the chat box icon is up in the top right corner. It looks like a text box.
Thank you, Cecilia. So we're starting to see some responses that we're supporting our first-year teachers. A lot of comments about teachers who are not as comfortable with technology. There's some comments about teachers who are juggling their family responsibilities at the same time, which I certainly understand. I'm in my bedroom hiding from my own kids right now doing this. There's some comments about veteran teachers as well. Lots of questions around Google Classroom and how to support that. Does anyone want to jump in orally and share anything? I see some early childhood teacher comments, which I'm really happy to see that we are supporting them as well and not forgetting about them.
Vanessa, this is Stephanie Milligan. I'll jump in and say something.
Great.
One of the things that we're noticing, so we launched last week, we're using Canvas as our tool for online learning with our teachers, as well as providing access to students. And we launched Lexia Core 5 and Dreambox in the last 2 weeks with our students. So we have lots of questions around where students are academically, if we can change their placement, questions from parents that are coming into teachers that they don't know how to answer. So there's a lot of activity and a lot of meetings like we're having, like we're right now with you, that we're having with teachers, as well as lots and lots of correspondence. So I think that veteran teachers are experiencing as many concerns and questions as our brand new teachers. So we kind of are supporting all teachers at all, many different levels.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to speak orally on this question?
It looks like a lot of people are commenting on teachers who are having difficulty with technology and not knowing how to use technology. And someone mentioned that that's especially true at the elementary level. Someone also mentioned special education teachers who are now holding IEPs online has made that difficult. I think every group probably has its own individual challenges.
Okay, we're ready to move on. Creating conditions for connections. Why do we need to create conditions for connections? Because everyone reacts differently to a crisis situation. At this point in our new reality, it will be very helpful to continue to build strong, trusting relationships with teachers. We can do this by monitoring one's manner when communicating on the phone. You need to be aware of your tone, body posture, and phone manner. And that goes for both phone and virtual type meetings. Some of us have cameras on our phones, and we can interact virtually that way. Also consider the lighting, eye contact, and facial expressions. Try to ensure that your telephone or video conference style is as relaxed and natural as your face-to-face style. Allow the silence. You know, one of my often used comments during our meetings is I'm really good at wait time. Well, we need to be aware that sometimes when there's silence at the other end of the phone, the person's kind of organizing their thoughts and their thinking. So we need to give them time to do that before we go on to our next statement to them. Ask permission to record the conversation. And this can actually be of benefit to the mentor and coach as well, because it will give you
Looks like Dan has lost sound. Vanessa or Jen, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So this is Vanessa. I think that the big takeaway for this piece was speaking about asking for permission to record the conversation. This really does provide a record of success and a way to track your conversations, but it also allows the coach or the mentor to go back and reflect on where you were at this point in time and make sure that you're really meeting all of the needs that you're working with.
I think I'm back.
Oops, sorry, go ahead, Dan. You are back.
Jen, do you want to finish your thought?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to move to the next slide. So here's your opportunity to respond using the Padlet as well. There's a question here that says, what successes and challenges are mentors and coaches facing when connecting with teachers in your district? And if you have something that you'd like to say in that, just click on the plus and you can begin your response. So what successes and challenges are mentors facing when connecting with teachers in your district?
The link to the Padlet was posted in the chat box as well.
If you're having trouble with getting on the Padlet, the link is in the chat box.
For those of you responding in the Padlet now, we're really only focusing on the first question. We'll get to those other questions as we move through the presentation, but right now we should be answering what successes and challenges are mentors and coaches facing when connecting with teachers in your district. Okay, we're going to move on to the next section. Thank you for your responses. Our hope is that we'll be able to put the slides together so that you can respond or react to anything that you've seen there. Before we do move on, is there anyone that has a thought or comment that they want to share about something that they saw from another district or something that you have going in your district that you find would be beneficial to anyone else? This would be the time to unmute your mic and speak.
A lot of good things shared in the Padlet. So please make sure, refer to this again, take a look at what people have written in there. A lot of really good successes and things that districts can learn from each other.
Okay, understanding the context. Why do we need to help teachers understand the context? We need to help teachers feel a sense of normalcy. This is such a new experience for most of them. They need to feel the support that you're giving them with this new normal. Remember that their ability to teach may be affected by factors beyond their control. As we wade into these uncharted waters, access to technology, internet connectivity, home environment, and illness all may have an impact on what the teachers are dealing with in their daily lives. we need to make sure that we consider readiness for technology first, then consider their readiness for instruction. Some of the comments that we heard early on is that some of the more senior teachers are having difficulty with this new virtual learning environment, and perhaps may not be as comfortable with technology as some of our newer teachers, younger teachers. So we need to help them through the device and software issues, any student device issues or lack thereof, and try to help them to gain a comfort level with technology. Mentors and coaches have to create a cognitive shift for the teachers using backward thinking. In other words, we need to take a look at the way that we've previously done our coaching cycles and basically do some backward mapping now, some backward thinking. Where do I want to get? This is what I want to do. Now I have to go back. How do I need to get here? That's a concept that perhaps is more evident now in the virtual environment than it has been during the classroom environments. You also, when you're working with teachers and other clients, you need to try to minimize the focus areas. In other words, try to be sure that you're not overwhelming them with too many areas on which to focus. Vanessa?
Okay, so we have another question for you, and we're asking you to again use the Padlet link. What supports do mentors and coaches need to effectively respond to the needs of teachers? So again, the link is posted in the chat box. If you would prefer, though, you're welcome to use the chat box for your answers. So we're seeing a lot of comments about providing tools and language to guide and support teachers. There is a challenge with some of the mentors who are part-time and how to flex their time. Here's a comment about consistent direction from the district, which I think is really important, using common language so everybody's on the same page. Another comment about expectations being clear from the school principals.
Supporting teachers and prioritizing their roles and responsibilities is a good one that someone posted.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, we're ready to move on. So why should mentors and coaches create conditions for new learning? Because given the current situation, many teachers feel like first-year teachers. We heard that earlier in one of the Padlet responses. It's new for all of us, and even the mentors and coaches are experiencing situations for the first time. Mentors and coaches, well, we'll get back to that in a minute. So one of the ways that we can create conditions for new learning is to create online PLCs. This will provide the opportunity for those in your district to connect with one another, those who have the same grade level, same subject area, or who share similar problems. I think it's important that we encourage weekly convenings, and that it's also important that mentors and coaches share that they're learning through this whole process as well, even if it's things that are not necessarily related to their school. Share some books that they're reading, show pictures, show some of their own writing and learning. It's important to remind them that it's perfectly acceptable to give permission to yourselves to just be and reflect on things as they are. Use of learning logs. Learning logs are a very common staple among the mentoring and coaching group. They allow for reflection of for the teacher's reflections as well as the mentor's reflections, and they can provide a record of the work that's being done with the teachers. Some of the questions that you could answer through your learning logs are, what did we cover or what do we accomplish in this session? How am I spending my time? Is my work making a difference? What are my what are my action items for the next meeting, and what are the teachers? What are the next steps? Logs also can be very informative in the conversations with the principal. Is there a pattern to the teacher's concerns? Is there a software or hardware issue that can be addressed by the principal? At the very least, logs can help the mentor or coach provide data to the principal.
Dan, can I interject? I know that I saw a number of comments mentioning communication to and from with the principal between the staff. So I think that really is an essential point to focus on at this point, that in your role as coaches or mentors, really you can be that link for direct communication between your supervisors, your principal, and your teachers.
Thank you very much. It's also important to establish the feedback loop. Providing feedback is not new to mentoring and coaching, but given the current situation, be sure to give the teachers descriptive feedback that is actionable and relevant to the area of focus. And then also ask the teacher for feedback. It's important that that there's a loop, that the feedback is coming and going through the teachers as well. The third bullet there, may need to reinvent the coaching cycles. We're going to talk about that in the next couple slides, but typically coaching cycles involve a series of coaching conversations and co-teaching to collaborate in the classroom. In-person collaboration is not possible at this time, but obviously we can do that through virtual coaching cycles. We can team up through, somebody had mentioned earlier about Google Classrooms. Google Meets is another important way that we can do it. And for those districts that are using Zoom also seems to be an effective way to communicate with your teachers.
So
Jen?
if you're familiar with Jim Knight, this may look familiar to you. This is his generic process for coaching. So Jim Knight and his team conducted a survey, and they found that only 4% of coaches were actually engaged in this impact cycle during this time. So we understand that these steps are still important. And in step one, you have the teacher and the coach. That's where they identify that current reality. So this is really still important because we want the teacher to be able to articulate where they want to go and be motivated to change. But it's also realistic that this cycle may not be feasible right now. So there is an alternative that may work better. And that alternative is called the growth model. This works if you only have one opportunity for maybe a single conversation with the teacher. This model could help structure that conversation and keep it efficient. You can see what each of the letters stand for. Jim Knight suggested that even if you can't make it through growth, you could just make it through grow. Goals, reality, options, and will. This is just a good resource to have with you when you're having a conversation with the teacher. So it's just important to remember that when things are out of control, people tend to become controlling. That would be me. And that is not what most of us need right now. What we need are structures to help us grow, but we also need someone to listen to us. So when you are approaching someone to coach them, just be mindful of what is going on. And may want to consider Maslow before Bloom.
Thank you, Jen. All right, Vanessa.
Okay, we have another question for you. And in this question, we'd like to have you utilize the chat box or unmute yourself to share orally with us. Learning needs to be prioritized at this time for your teachers. So we're seeing some comments about technology, work-life balance, self-care, we've all talked about, maintaining high expectations for student growth, which I think is really key. Stress management, technology needs, so a lot of the same topics we've already identified. Another comment about working with your team in this distance learning environment and how can that be successful? Communicating with parents and students. Clarity around what's required of the student. I think that's really key as well. Okay, thanks everyone.
Somebody mentioned how to decide what to prioritize, and that last question is asking you what needs to be prioritized, but that is a consideration. How do you decide what needs to be prioritized? That was a good thought in the chat box.
Our next slide is actually asking 3 different questions, and we can take them one at a time, or we can respond to them in the Padlet. So I'm going to open the Padlet now. And is there anything else you wish to share for the good of the group? If there is, you could go ahead and begin writing that in the Padlets. Anything unique to your particular district that you found helpful that maybe hasn't been mentioned in one of the other questions? Is there a concern that you may have? Well, actually, that'll be the next question. But anything else that you wish to share? For those of you who are induction coordinators or coach supervisors, well, it seemed as though this was geared toward the mentors and the coaches. Obviously, we were hoping to kind of model it for you so that you could take the information here back and share it with your mentors and your coaches. Okay, moving on to the next question. What other questions and or concerns do you still have? Click on the plus and begin to write inside the in the Padlet. Questions or concerns that you still have with this virtual learning? Anything that you still have questions or concerns about?
I like the comment, progress, not perfection. Moving in the right direction. I love that.
This is Christopher from City Schools. I'm the one that put that in there. That's a huge mantra that I always communicate to teachers. And I think especially in our current learning environment, that's a shared opportunity for us to not focus so heavily on perfection because this is a joint learning experience. So it's about making movement, high expectations for students, continuing learning, but also we're in this group mentality that we're learning together. So it's progress that we need to demonstrate, not any type of end goal of perfection.
That is great. Thank
Good
you.
point. Good points, Christopher. Thank you.
There's also a lot of comments about equity in instruction, and I know that we're dealing with that throughout the state and all of our communities. So I think that is something we all need to continue to focus on and think about how can we ensure that we're delivering high quality instruction for our students that don't have access to the internet, and can we do it in a way that is effective with packets, or is there another way we can reach our students? I also wanted to mention something that came up in the chat box earlier was how we continue to provide intervention and support to our kids who are below grade level, who may be missing that direct instruction when we're in face-to-face time at school.
I just wanted to call out something that someone shared for the good of the group. They're happy to report that their days are freed up to actually coach without the distraction of other duties as assigned. As a former coach in the school system, I'm very familiar with other duties as assigned, so that's great that you have more freedom to coach right now. I hope it's going well.
And along those lines, somebody said, are there tasks we should absolutely not be doing? It feels like any way we can help should be up and open for consideration. And that is true. I mean, we need to look for those opportunities to help in every way. Content aside, maybe the social emotional aspect of the student, of the teacher needs to take top priority. And I think that probably depends upon the teacher that you are working with.
Someone asked the question, and I thought it was a good question. How are other counties handling the feedback to students if they get a paper packet? It's easy to do this with online, but they feel out of touch with the paper packet situation for those students that don't have internet. Does anyone else have a similar situation in your district? And could you give some feedback on that, either by unmuting yourself or writing in the chat box or on this Padlet?
In Washington County, the packets are picked up at the schools and are delivered back to the schools. The principals are scanning them and email them to teachers.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
We'll talk about it. Someone mentioned tutorials to parents. That's a really good point. They don't have expertise in your content areas. They don't have the pedagogy you've got and how to work with kids. And as we all know, our own kids don't want to listen to us. You know, they'll listen to an outsider before they're going to listen to us. So it is difficult for parents, and we need to help them in any way we can.
There's some comments in the chat box about parents sending pictures of student work or emailing teachers in regards to the feedback question, and then teachers making a lot of phone calls to keep up with students. Heather posted information about a workshop regarding ensuring equity post-COVID. She says that professional learning coordinators have received information about the workshop, and she included a link to register. It would be most appropriate for program coordinators to attend. You can find that information in the chat box or reach out to your coordinators.
And we can send that information out in a follow-up email as well. Thank you, Heather.
I wanted to share another strategy that some of your colleagues are using, and that is providing instruction through the local access television station. So I know we've had a couple of comments about equity and making sure that we can reach all of our students. That can be another really effective way to provide that direct instruction to your kids. So maybe that could be something your district could consider.
Okay.
On the question of supporting parents and students who are getting packets and not online, Some people have put some really very good suggestions in the chat box, sending pictures of student work, emailing teachers, phone calls, doing a lot of phone calls with parents and students. So really good information in the chat box. The chat box is part of the recording of this webinar, so you will be able to access this later, and we can certainly copy and paste it and transcribe it for you, as well as the Padlet. You're going to have access to the Padlet after this.
Okay. The last question that we have up there is, what supports do you need from MSDE? Obviously, we're limited in what we can do right now, but if there is something that MSDE can do, we will be glad to do it. So if there's anything that you can think of that you need to help support you in your role, or the mentors and coaches in their roles, this is just a spot where you can list it here, and we'll take those and consider all of them.
Okay, I'm seeing more discussion about using the growth model or an alternate coaching cycle. So this is Jen. I participated in a webinar last week called Coaching Through COVID. It was through KickUp, and it was Jim Knight, and I am failing to remember the other presenter's name. It was really, really good. I'd be happy to, I can send the link so you can watch it. A lot of good information in there.
Jen, we have the link. I asked Dan to add the link to this PowerPoint, so we'll be sharing that.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
Cecilia, the critical content question, is that something MSDE is working to provide to all school districts?
If you're talking about the continuity of learning documents that we sent out, I believe they have been finalized. Where we are right now is that Dr. Salmon has been in contact with the superintendents, and the superintendents are turning in plans for continuity of instruction. And if you need any access to any of that, I believe all of that is on the MSD website. Dan will be sharing that information with you as we progress through this presentation. He will be sharing that website with you. But if there's anything that's not on that website that you need additional information about, you feel welcome to email any one of us, and we can get, if we don't know the answers, we can get the answers. But yes, if you're referring to the continuity of instruction documents, those are finalized. But of course, nothing's ever final.
So this is Heather. I just want to add that I was on a coordinators meeting last week, and I am relatively certain that on that call it was shared that supervisors were not to share those documents just yet. And I know Gail's on the call, and Gail is a content supervisor. So Gail, can you provide any more insight on that? Like have you been given the okay to share the continuity of learning standards with the ELA supervisors in the local school systems?
I'm going to jump in, Heather, because I can answer that question. Actually, what we told the coordinators, the content coordinators, is that they can share them, but they have to be shared via webinar. They can't be shared via an email. So all of the coordinators most of them are meeting weekly with their supervisors of their various content areas, and they are sharing the the continuity of standards documents that way. I do believe most of them have been shared. Speaking for Gail, I do know that the ELA one is going to be shared right after this because she has her weekly meeting with supervisors right after this, and she will be sharing it. And it is posted in the ELA e-community, and I know other content areas are doing the same. So the answer to that is yes, all the coordinators have been given permission to share them, but they have to share it via webinar. So it isn't necessarily going out on the same day, it's going out as those webinars are getting scheduled.
So that may be why whoever's posting that question on the Padlet, perhaps not all content areas have received this information just yet. But as Cecilia said, I guess in the next couple of days, you can expect that all of those will be shared with the districts.
Okay, before we leave this page, I wanted to go back to our successes. Some of the things that the districts have listed as things that are working in their system, and I'm just going to go through and read a few of them. Google Meets has been a valuable tool, and Google Forms for collecting information. Holding Zoom meetings and check-ins that address general concerns, challenges, and supporting teachers with distance learning platforms, given that they're just becoming acclimated themselves. Being included in school virtual staff meetings helps keep us in the loop with the needs of our school. Virtual team meetings, due to this is what we phrased earlier today. Due to online learning, everyone's a new teacher. Our true new teachers do not feel that they're at a disadvantage due to the lack of experience or familiarity with the school system. Erica mentioned that the new teachers are the ones that are really rocking the distance learning. They're most comfortable with and seem to have the most broadest knowledge of the digital tools. Zoom meetings. Providing support and offering help to teachers without overwhelming them or adding more to their plates. Zoom meetings, juggling schedules. Here's an interesting one. Teachers that are traditionally not reaching out for support now are, so keeping the mentors and the coaches busy. Google Meets and so forth. Okay, let's move on to the next part of our presentation. Cecilia mentioned a website or a web page that MSDE has created. It's on the screen now, and I'm going to actually open it up so that, so that we can explore some of the resources that are on here. This is the page that is on the MSDE website, COVID resources for Maryland. It lists on it a number of items that just wanted to make you aware of. Things like updates from the superintendent, updates on school closures, school meal site locator, planning documents and guidance documents, waivers. There's the Maryland COVID-19 website, press releases, educational resources, frequently asked questions, and local continuity of learning. Those are the plans I think Cecilia and Heather were just talking about. All of those things are available on the website, as well as all of the other things listed on the left-hand side of the page. Cecilia, did you want to make any particular comments, or Heather, about any of these in particular?
Yeah, just to be clear, the document that you're talking about, the continuity of learning, no, that is not what we were talking about. Those are the distance learning plans by district.
Oh, gotcha.
You can click on that and see what the districts have submitted, but it's not the key standards that the person was asking about in the Padlet.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's correct. Those are the things that the districts, I mentioned earlier, the districts have to turn in their plans. And those are the plans that are on this page. So you can see what each district is doing. And those plans have to be turned into Dr. Salmon. And Dr. Salmon is meeting weekly and sometimes even more often than that with superintendents talking about planning and moving forward. The other thing I'd like to mention about this page is it's updated constantly. The frequently asked questions are being updated constantly. The resources are being updated constantly. So if you do check out this page, don't assume you've checked it out and you've seen everything. Please go back and look again because things are being added. There's a lot of good stuff in there. There's a lot of good stuff happening across the entire state. And we need to learn from each other. And one of the things that George mentioned in the chat box was that one of the things that's come through with this crisis situation is that the inequity that exists across the state, and that is true. It exists from district to district. It even exists within districts as far as capacity and schools to schools, and that's something we have to consider. So we really need to think outside the box. And I know people are using phones in ways that they've never used phones before, because even if homes don't necessarily have computers that students can use for various reasons, including the fact that their parents may need them for telework, they do, in general, older students at least have phones. So districts are using phones in a more creative way and having students take pictures of things. And somebody also shared that earlier. So we just need to really think outside of the box, and we will take a look at all the questions that you put in the Padlet. So you're welcome to continue to put questions into the Padlet, and we will seek those answers for you and definitely provide more resources for you as we are able to assemble those.
Thank you. Jen?
So, yep. So the next few slides contain links to several resources that you may find useful, but we want to particularly draw your attention to a webinar that is taking place tomorrow from 3 to 4. It's hosted by Learning Forward. You may find it beneficial. You can click that link to register. I know Dan will send this out to you. And I will be there on that webinar, not presenting, but just listening.
As we all will. Thanks, Jen. The next few slides have articles, blog information, some webinar contact information, as well as the key points that were brought out in the webinar that we listened to the other day. These are all accessible by just clicking on them. And like I said, when you do get this, you'll have the opportunity to explore any of these resources. This page has a webinar of the Jim Wright, Diane Lauer webinar, 6 takeaways. When you click, if you do happen to click on that one, that gives you, actually, let me open it up for you. Again, it's from KickUp. It summarized the webinar, but also gives you a number of other links within this that can give you additional information that could be helpful as you're working with your mentors and your coaches. There's a live webcast coming up that can be clicked on as well, virtual coaching logs, instructional coaching group Facebook pages, lots of information on that one page. I don't know if that page can get you directly to the webinar that was done, but if it doesn't, we'll come up, we'll find a way to get it to you. One of the things that he mentioned in the webinar was a toolkit that they've created, and that's listed up here at the top. COVID-19 resources, and it includes the virtual logs that were mentioned in that last one. So we have a number of resources for you, and if you can click on the MSDE webpage, there's even more there. We hope to continue adding to our list and providing you with additional information as we're dealing with this new virtual world. Want to thank everybody for coming today. Looks like we shaved a little bit of time off the presentation, so we're going to give you about a half an hour back. I did want to point out that our next induction briefing is scheduled for June 2nd. We'll let you know as we get closer to that date whether it will be an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting. At this point, we know that we're not going to be in schools at least until the 15th of May, but that date is obviously not set in stone. Cecilia, Heather, Jen, Vanessa, anything else for the good of the group?
I was just going to say, and I don't know, Dan, you may have said this already, but Dan is planning to kind of curate all these responses that were in the chat and in the Padlet and kind of send out just a summary of some successes and some resources that were discussed on this webinar. So you can be on the lookout for that follow-up resource.
And Deborah Morton put the link to the recording of Jim Knight's coaching webinar in the chat box. So thank you, Deborah, for doing that. Several of the MSDE staff attended that webinar and had glowing reviews of it when they afterwards. So we do recommend that one. Again, we don't recommend any particular vendor. So Kickup as a vendor, we don't necessarily recommend, but there's good information on that webinar that I think would be very valuable for you to listen to that to assist you with your coaching and your mentoring.
Thank you.
We'll leave the chat box open for another minute or two in case you have any other questions, and then we'll stop the recording. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for your time, everyone, especially my striving readers, people that were able to join us. We hope that you found this helpful for you.